Hello guys, probably you will agree that one of the best ways to learn coding is to look at someone else's code, especially for a bigger project, and to see how it's structured and how it all works together. So today will be one of those videos, and on the screen you see a tweet by Casper, author of DayByDay CRM, formerly known as Flarepoint, which is written on Laravel, and recently was renamed into DayByDay, and even more recently open sourced publicly on GitHub. And historically, I did a review on my blog on Laravel Daily about Flarepoint, but it was 2016, so really long time ago. It was Laravel 5.1 from what I remember. And now DayByDay CRM is pretty new, totally revamped the code by Casper. And in this video, we will see what it has under the hood. I've installed it locally, tried it, and I will explain some coding decisions. And disclaimer, quite a lot of things will be my personal opinion about how I structured the code in the past or seen other people doing that, so I'm not necessarily right about all the decisions, and Casper did a great job on structuring the whole project. Maybe some of the things won't be my #1 decision if I would do that, but his decisions are totally fair and the whole project works. I have a checklist prepared for this video, so there will be a dozen of topics. We will look at different parts of the code of the repository and discuss them. So if we click Medium article, there's a Medium article. I will link it in the description of the video with the decision about DayByDay CRM and why it was open sourced and stuff like that. But there is a link to GitHub, and this is exactly what we will be talking about. And another disclaimer notice, before shooting this video, I've opened a few issues on the GitHub related to installation, and Casper was really quick to fix them, comment them. Also, there was another guy really active helping us. So I guess if you want to help with DayByDay CRM or actively participate, Casper is really active here. So let's start with the installation. They have a separate wiki page for installation, which is really typical for any Laravel project. So git clone, database configuration, Composer install migrations, and also npm install and npm run dev. So that is not from Laravel, but it's compiling all the assets. And when you're done with that, there are default credentials. Also, you can add some dummy data. So insertion of dummy data, there is a seeder class, dummy database seeder, which I've run already. And there is a dashboard like this after you log in. Actually, let's log out. Let's log out. That's the login screen. So if we go admin com admin123, by default, locally, it installs Laravel debug bar as well, so we can see how many queries are there running in the background. So this is the dashboard with 50 dummy tasks, 10 leads and clients. And this is a CRM project, so client relationship management with leads, tasks, and project. And if you go here, you see the list of the projects, for example, or clients' projects are empty. So let's take a look at the clients. There is a tour as well. So we end tour, we can click on the client and see their own data, edit something, add a task, add an invoice, and stuff like that. So pretty typical CRM. And now let's take a look at the code. Whenever I'm looking at the code of a new project, I check two things first: Composer.json and the routes. Composer.json to define how old the project is and how well maintained over the years, so which versions of the packages and which packages are used. So we start from that, and we see that it's Laravel Framework 6. So not the latest, but there is already an issue on GitHub by Casper himself to update to Laravel 7, and I'm pretty sure it won't be a difficult update because Laravel 6 and 7 are not that different. Maybe questionable decision is Laravel Collective HTML, which is kind of an old way of doing things, but it's totally working. So that's Composer.json, which looks okay. And this requirement, by the way, is pretty strict, so 7.3.9. I'm not sure why, but basically if you have the latest versions of the PHP, you will be able to run that CRM. And if we look at the routes web, my goal here usually is to understand how big the project is, so how many routes. Okay, so I've made the font smaller, so we would look at all the routes, and these are the routes, quite a lot actually, so 220 rows, well grouped by prefix with absences, appointments, payments, invoices, notifications, and all of that. There is a chance that instead of those get, patch, and post, it could be done with route resources, but I'm not too deep into the project to actually know that. And there is actually a resource, so probably Casper tried to use resource whenever possible, and for other stuff made individual routes. So this is, I would say, a medium-sized project, not really big, but with 100+ routes. It's quite a good case study for how to structure Laravel projects in general. And the next topic to discuss is data tables. So this table list, and it's similar in other pages. So for example, all clients, what it is using is data tables. So if we go back to our Composer.json, and now let's make the font bigger again. So in Composer.json, this package is server-side rendering of Datatables.NET library. We're using the same thing in our quick admin panel generated code, so I'm familiar with that pretty well. In the index blade, there is a table, but it is empty, so table for clients, and then all the logic in the table is done in jQuery with calling data table function with AJAX route clients data. So this is the API call. You can consider that API call to get the data, and all the magic is happening in JavaScript with quite a lot of logic. Also specifying the columns that are visible, so company name, VAT and address, and also buttons to edit and delete, using entrust package to check the permissions. And then that route clients data is in routes web prefix clients data, clients controller any data. That's an interesting name, by the way, but still it works. So any data, it's using that backend Laravel package data tables off with adding the columns for links, for edit, for view, and form to delete. So that's a good example, and if you want to know more about how that works, I will link in the description the link to the package Oracle data tables. And that way of doing things, by the way, server-side rendering of the data tables, helps with big amount of data. So for example, if there are 10,000 of clients, if you don't do API AJAX call, then it loads all the 10,000 records and only then does the JavaScript to show one page. If you do it server-side way, it loads empty table, then calls the server for 10 records for the exact page, and then shows only 10 records. So that is much better for bigger tables. Next, I want to show an unusual way to load JavaScript. Instead of doing section and then yield, there is a thing called stack and push to scripts, or to actually any blade code, but it's usually used for JavaScript. So there are data tables, 4 data tables in the client show page, so client ID. There are projects, tasks, leads, and invoices, and each of them is the data table, and each of them requires the script. So how to yield that section, if there is a section JavaScript, for example, in the master blade, how to yield that separately. So to combine 4 yields into one. So that's exactly the usage of stack and push. So in show blade of that page, clients show, there are includes clients tabs, projects tab, task tab, lead tab, and all of that. And each of them has the data table logic pretty similar to what we've shown before. And instead of doing yield scripts, there is a push scripts. And that show blade extends layouts master, and layouts master blade at the bottom it has stack scripts. So the way it works, stack scripts blade command means that whenever you have the push to that script, so invoice tab blade push that scripts, then projects tab push that scripts, and then however many pushes to the scripts happen, everything combined together is appended to the stack of scripts. So this is a perfect usage of combining multiple JavaScript sections into one on the master blade. Next topic, let's talk about enums and foreign keys and integers. I have a separate video shot pretty recently about what field to use, enum or integer, if you have, for example, invoices and invoices status. In this case, in DayByDay CRM, you can see that it is a varchar, so it's not foreign key to some invoice statuses table, it doesn't exist, but at the same time, it's not an enum field with statuses like draft, published, or paid, or something like that. There is a third way to do all of that with a specific enum faking kind of enum class in PHP. So in client's controller, for example, to view that status, there is an invoice status class involved, which transforms invoice's status as a varchar into some value. And let's take a look what is invoice status. It is a class in folder app enums, and if we open up the file tree, we have app enums, and there are 4 classes for specifically that reason. And inside of that class, there is all the logic of possible statuses, constants of draft, how it is shown as English language, then setting the value, getting the value, exceptions, and everything related to potentially setting the invoice status. So in the future, if new invoice status is needed, that is the class to edit. So database stays the same, varchar, but inside of that class there probably will be a new constant here and probably some changes, for example, in this method, so values, and maybe a few more tweaks. So this is one of the ways. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it's a pretty good way to save enums without using the enum field in the database directly. The next thing I wanted to show is events and listeners. They are used in a really good way. So whenever the client is stored, new client, store method, there are Eloquent commands. So create a client, create a contact, then flash message as a success, and then event of client action with the parameter what action was actually performed, so created. And then client action is an event class, app events client action, which doesn't do anything by itself, so it's pretty typical Laravel event. And then it is attached, it is listened by listeners that are configured in app provider's event service provider. So whenever client action happens, event, these two classes are taking that action, listens to that action. So client action notify and client action log. And this is the list of listeners in general. So if we click client action notify, for example, there is a get client get action and then notify to send the notification, for example, sending emails to whoever may be concerned, some administrator or team members or something like that. And client action log is just taking the text, taking the action, performing the text, and then writes that into a log of some kind. So this is a good way to separate the concerns. So not the controller takes those actions, but after all the Eloquent operations in the controllers are finished, there is an event fired, which is listened by however many listeners you provide. The next topic is services, so how to use service classes. And we're not running away from the store method in client's controller with the same message. So controller should take care of the main operations, and whatever is kind of a separate logic should be separated somewhere else. So we took a look at events, and now whenever the store is happening on the client, so client create, and take a look at this, client number. So there is some kind of a logic of client number, which is kind of auto increment, but not exactly. And there is a class that is responsible for exactly that. So there is client number service. If we click that, there's app services client number service. And what it is doing is setting next client number, probably somewhere in the settings. I'm not sure whether it's in database or in some kind of config. Oh, it is in the settings database table, probably. This is a model, I assume. Yes, it is a model, so it is saved in the database and incremented. And there are quite a few services. If we take a look at services, app services folder, so there is activity services, comment, invoice, invoice number, storage, and search. So this is the way how to separate your logic from the controller or from the model. And in my opinion, you should use services whenever you have some separate logic, but that logic could be combined with itself in a few methods or a few properties to create a separate class for that. Another interesting topic are repositories, so repository classes. And this is one of the most often questions I get everywhere, how to use repository classes and whether it's good or bad to use them. And this project does use them, and let's see how exactly. So in the tasks controller, one of the tasks is to invoice. I assume it's creating the invoice. And to create the invoice, there's quite a few things involved, so the logic for the invoice. So there was a separate class created for that, this invoices invoice. So what is this invoices? This invoices is a protected property of a controller, which is set in the constructor, and it is an invoice repository contract. In the contract, there are methods described. What methods should there be? Get all invoices, get all open invoices, and stuff like that. And then there is actual repository, invoice repository, which implements those methods. So repositories are typically used when there is some bigger logic around an Eloquent model or around database table. So in this case, it's invoices, so this is the invoice model, but there are more operations involved around invoices. So finding something, invoicing, creating the invoice lines, creating the API integrations, book the invoice, set the status, and all of that. And that should be somewhere. And for that, there could be a service. So it's a tricky question, what is the difference between service and a repository? Usually a repository is tied to one model or one database table, and service is more abstract to whatever topic it is. It may be not necessarily the database table at all. So in this case, invoice repository is tied to invoices, and all the services are kind of outside database table in general. But there is another example I found in the repositories. So there is currency, for example. There is a currency repository which has all the currencies inside of the repository itself. So there is a static variable, currencies, Danish krone, US dollar, and all of those currencies. They are not in the database, they are in the repository itself, and all the methods of the repository are around that data. So default currency, get the code, get the value, get the symbol, get precision, and all of that. All those operations look like they would come from the database table, but instead of database table, the actual data is inside of the repository itself. I haven't seen that behavior in any projects in my past, but it's a pretty logical thing to do. So that's another example of a repository. The next topic to talk about are observers, Eloquent model observers, and they are registered in app provider's app service provider. So these all the things which are observing all the changes on these models. So for example, whenever something is changed with the client, there is an observer fired looking for these methods. So whenever the client is created, nothing happens, updated, that is empty too, but deleted has something. So whenever the client is deleted, there are relations to be deleted, which is really like, it makes sense. So whenever client is deleted, relations, there is even a set of relations to be deleted along with the client. But at this point, in my personal opinion, it's starting to be too much of a different patterns inside of one project. So we have services, we have repositories, we have observers, and also we have events. So in itself, each of those patterns are okay, but it may give a headache to a new developer who would try to start working with that project because there's too many things involved and it's not totally clear which is fired, observer or event or something else. So maybe I would transform observers to events as well, and then it will be one less pattern in the project and would be potentially clearer. Another topic to talk about are view composers. They're usually used when you need to have some kind of global variable inside of the view, inside of the blade, but it's pretty hard to pass that variable from the controller. So example is in client's show blade, there is an include of partials client header, and client header has a variable contact info. And that contact info is actually provided to the blade, not from the controller. There is a file, view composer service provider, which is attaching to any of the views provided a class view composer. So in our case, client show, client header composer. And inside of that class, this is it. You can compose and you can assign view with contact and contact info. And there is some kind of logic inside of that class. It's kind of a workaround if it's pretty hard to get that data from the controller, but you do have that in Blade. So I wouldn't advise to abuse it or use it too much. Use it for global variables usually. In this case, in case of DayByDay CRM, probably it will be pretty possible to get that logic somewhere in the controller. But since there are, 6 composers, probably they fit inside of the project and there is logic behind that. And this is the way how to use them. And final 2 small things I wanted to show you that I've noticed in the controller, so maybe that would be a quick tip for you. So when creating the form, creating the client, there are variables passed, and with users and with industries. And there is no such function as with user. You cannot click in PHP Storm or with industries. So not sure if you know, but Laravel has that magic function. I'm not a big fan of that because it's not clickable, it's not inspectable, but you can make your code a little shorter by doing, instead of with users as a variable and then the value, you can do with user and it will become kind of a fake method. And same with industries, and that means that this value is assigned to the variable lowercase users and in this case lowercase industries. So in clients create blade, here there is a client's form included, and then in the client's form you have industries as a variable or users also as a variable in the form. So this is just a quick tip how to make your code a few symbols shorter. And another thing from the controller, how to show the success messages after something is done. So in client's controller store, this is the way how to set the global variable, global flash message, whatever that message is. you assign that to flash message and assign that to flash of the session, which means that on the next page, so whatever you redirect to, on that page there is a global session variable, but only for one page, which is flash message. And then in the master blade of the whole project, there is a section to check those. If session has flash message warning, you see the warning. As you can see, type warning, and in case of success, there is a type of success. So this is probably the most simple way how to set the global messages after some action has been done. So that's it, an overview of DayByDay CRM, of things that I've noticed. There are many, many more things to look at. So please spend the time on the repository and thank Casper as an author. He's done a wonderful job. Thank him by subscribing to the GitHub repository, put a star there, and also DayByDay CRM is kind of a product. It is open sourced, but still, you can purchase that as well. So if you click DayByDay CRM, I'm not paid to do that, I'm not advertising it, but this could be a way to thank Casper for his job. There is a pricing page, some kind of a price if you want the CRM, and maybe you can contact Casper for custom work on that CRM, go and do that. And if you have any more suggestions, what open source project could I review this way, shoot in the comments below. Also, as usual, I advise you to subscribe to the channel because I'm shooting the videos almost daily now, and see you guys in other videos.